Well, the SADC region is prone to heavy rains and floods during this time of the year. South Africa has already experienced heavy rains recently. KwaZulu-Natal is still struggling to relocate families who were left homeless due to the floods that affected Durban and other areas in April this year. Bishop Nathi Zondi is the Executive Committee Secretary of the KwaZulu-Natal Christian Council. He joins us now via Zoom. Bishop, thanks very much indeed for joining us and welcome to the program.
Thank you for having me. Greetings to your viewers at home.
Bishop, this is a very difficult time, I guess, for many families, and it's been difficult for some time now, given the weather patterns. Just before we get deep into this conversation, what have been some of the big challenges that you've noticed and that you've observed in the work that you do that people are facing?
Well, thank you. There are few observations that we've made as a Council of Churches working throughout the province since the flooding started was one. Remember that a number of people have lost their homes. Because of that, they had to be accommodated in halls, in community halls, in church halls, and in some mass communal areas. And that on its own has come with a number of challenges. For example, what happens is quite often people lose their privacy. And the families don't have time for themselves as families because they are now all of a sudden find themselves in communal areas. But also, you also have another big problem that also started creeping in because these areas are not built to accommodate people who live there. For example, these halls will not have ablution facilities and they will not have facilities for cooking. And because of that, and that also created a problem for a number of people that occupy these spaces. But also the issue of mixing of young people, the children, the women and the men in the same space. Also that came with a number of problems on its own, because all of a sudden you have the children who have now to see their families or their parents or adults who have to undress in front of them and all of that. And that created a number of problems on its own.
All right. So,
but also, I think I must also add another challenge also was now that they were living in communal areas, many of them did not have their clothes with them because their belongings had been washed away by the water. So provision of bedding, mattresses, sponges became a big issue.
We believe the KwaZulu-Natal government is closing all mass care centres tomorrow, Saturday, meeting the deadline that it's set itself to relocate flood victims before Christmas. Has everybody been relocated from what you've seen? Well,
we as a Council of Churches, Peter, I can assure you that we have been working in a number of areas, mainly in eThekwini, in Mgungundlovu, in Pietermaritzburg, and also on the South Coast. We have a number of our local ecumenical action networks working there, working with a number of community-based leaders and community activists in these areas. The reports that we get on a daily basis that yes, a number of these facilities are being shut down and a number of communities are being relocated. But we still have a number of communities that have not yet been relocated. I know that, for example, if you go in the northern areas of eThekwini, there's still a number of people that still are in halls, but also some of our member churches are still housing some of the people in their church halls. But of course, we do appreciate, I must say, we do appreciate the government and the efforts to relocate people to much more decent spaces. And I think that will go a long way. But I can assure you there's still a number of areas that are still, where people are still yet to be relocated.
Let's talk a little bit about the latest downpours. How are they affecting parts of KZN? And also, I would imagine that those that were previously hit it's almost getting hit a second time.
Yeah, the two, yeah, you're quite right. You're quite right. We have been, for example, what we did was, as the church in the province, we mobilized a number of our partners and provided temporary shelters in the form of tents. And we provided as well portable toilets for the families, as well as JoJo tanks. Now, the latest downpour did in some areas affect those tents, because some of them really in the areas where they are pitched up, you find that it's not an area that has been well excavated for that purpose. So some of these families have had to be moved to safer accommodation areas for families to be safe. But I must say that when compared to the past, this one has been much better. The damage has not been as severe as it was when we first had the first phase of the floods. We are, I think, generally coping when compared to the first phase of flooding.
At times of disasters, often women and children are left the most vulnerable. I just wonder if there are special programs or special help that they're getting, given the vulnerability that they face.
You know, Peter, it's something that we picked up immediately. When flooding occurred, our national office, the South African Council of Churches, came down with the president, the general secretary, and the teams of heads of churches. Immediately, what they picked up was the fact that women and children, most of these areas were predominantly occupied by women and children. And it did not take long before we also picked up some of the problems. One of them, we found that there was a lot of trauma among the young children, but also a lot of trauma among women. Because remember that for now, women had the lack of family spaces where women could, work with their children and their kids. Or, remember, some of these are mothers and some of these are young babies, and there's no designated spaces for them to take care of their children. And also, a lot of these mothers had to prepare their children as they go to school from these communal areas. And we have picked up that one biggest need in these communities has been psychosocial support as well as spiritual support. So what we have done since then was to train and equip a number of church leaders and community leaders on counseling, providing psychosocial counseling to individuals, but also to families as well as women. So we have, through our local ecumenical action networks and fraternals in the local areas, done a refresher course for all of them, but we have also put together a program that really specifically target people that are in these areas. Remember, Peter, that some of the people affected are not in community halls, but they are staying with neighbors, and some are living in their houses, even though their houses are not as safe. So we provide psychosocial support as well as spiritual support, but we also make sure that we provide some of their basic needs: sanitary towels, the blankets, the napkins for children, and all of those needs that are basic to women as well as to children. So we have got an ongoing program of support to these communities, as well as those that are living in their homes and living with their neighbors.
Bishop Zondi, unfortunately we've run out of time. Thank you so much indeed for joining us, and we wish you the best and strength with the good work that you're doing. Thank you very much indeed.
You are welcome, Peter. We also wish you strength, and we want to say Merry Christmas to all the people of South Africa. May the Lord bless them.
Thank you very much indeed. Good night, Bishop. All right, that's Bishop Nathi Zondi, who's the Executive Committee Secretary of the KwaZulu-Natal Christian Council. And they're working very hard to help those that have been affected by floods and left displaced and left homeless, many of them in KwaZulu-Natal.